I got to meet one of my old colleagues, Lim Ucida, and I'm trying to get him to be one of our guest lecturers for the Thursday night sessions. He did his PhD dissertation on um, identity, and specifically self-identity as it relates to like identity formation as it relates to people's online personas. Um,
And Fred, just to let you know, we're looking at an apartment building. Is that what
yes,
you wanted us to see? Okay, awesome.
yes,
Thank you.
oddly enough,
Okay,
that's
just
my
checking.
opening slide. And so, anyways, I just think it would be fascinating for you all, especially if you ever have younger people as clients. Um, so much of young people's identity is formed online, either in their online gaming communities where they may have avatars or completely different personas they're projecting. And anyways, I got to have coffee with him and we made a little video. But he asked me, he goes, Fred, what does a philosopher think about in their day-to-day life? And I had just got done staying at this Holiday Inn Express, and I took a picture of it. And all I could think of looking at this building was its utilitarianism with accents, which I thought was really kind of funny. This idea of, whoops, I lost my slideshow. How do I get back to my slides? Anyways, this idea of when I'm out and about, I just have this warehouse of philosophical concepts and ideas. And utilitarianism, as you know, is the philosophy of what works best, costs cheapest, lasts longest. And a lot of our society has been built on those principles. Greatest good for the greatest numbers. One of the downside, of course, could be that it could also mean that the ends justify the means. And so it works fairly well with the democratic society because you just kind of vote and it's the majority will wins. And so it's adapted nicely with our American constitutional republic, anyways. Um, but, anyways, as we were talking, I said, I have a better example though than the Holiday Inn. And and this was from Baudrillard. Let me see if I can share my PowerPoint back again. Okay, here we go. So one of the conferences the school sent me to was in Nashville, and I don't know if you've ever been to Nashville, but it was at the Gaylord Opryland. And apparently, Gaylord has a bunch of these resort hotels all over the world. And the idea behind them is these all-inclusive resorts, but they create kind of like this fantasy zone. And the whole time I was at the Gaylord, so in Nashville, it was humid. I'm not used to that kind of humidity coming from California. It wasn't overly oppressive, but you definitely felt like you were being wrapped in a warm, damp blanket. And when I walked into the Gaylord, the lobby was all this posh, like marble and kind of over the top. But then you walk through the main lobby into this 150-foot tall atrium looking up at the sky, and it had palm trees and waterfalls and islands and all this kind of strange stuff. And all I could think about when I walked in there was this French philosopher called Baudrillard, and he wrote a book called Simularca and Simulation. So basically, what he's saying is that in our Western industrial societies, what we've done is we've created these hyper real places like Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm or Hollywood Studios or the Gaylord Opryland. And as impressive as it is, the first thing I looked up was how tall that atrium was. And at 150 feet tall, which is impressive, I was thinking my coast redwoods, a normal coast redwood can get 300 feet tall. So if you can imagine, twice the height of that atrium. And it was a marvel of engineering, and it was pretty amazing. Um, the waterfalls murmured on schedule. There were riverboats going around this artificial boutique island to nowhere with people riding little boats to nowhere. Uh, but the grand illusion, what Baudrillard thinks it does is we go to these places, we have a good time. There's no bird poop. It's like perpetual spring. There's no mud. There's no leaves on the sidewalk. It's just nature made, sanitized, and safe. But Baudrillard is saying what happens is when we come back to our suburban houses after visiting these fantasy lands, we get the impression that our day to day lives are real. But he's saying our day to day lives with our indoor plumbing and air conditioning and refrigeration, these sorts of, I mean, think a lot of us probably never even touched the earth today, at least the actual earth. We were on a sidewalk or a road or concrete, and we walked on that right into our house, and we have this like level of separation going on. And what these simulacrum do is they make us think that our day-to-day life is real, but the reality is much more basic than that, of like real rivers, white water, where you're not just going around in this languid little stream in circles, but you could be putting your life at risk. And there's definitely bugs, and there's cold to chill your bones and heat to make you sweat and all these things. And so it just made me think about the true nature of reality, at least as it pertains to the natural world, as opposed to these artificial constructs that we've made, whether that be the suburbs or off at these resorts. And so my conclusion was reality awaits elsewhere. It lives where the rivers carve their way to the sea, not in loops that return to nowhere. It is found where boats tremble on the whitewater, where risk is real and outcomes unknown. It rises in the storms that drench the skin, in the heat that presses heavy, in the cold that bites, in the bugs and bird droppings, branches scattered across the paths. Standing under the glass ceiling, I found it hard to imagine that the redwoods were twice as tall, uncontained, open to wind and sky, and all I knew that was my heart ached to leave the dome behind and return to the woods, to stand again beneath giants not made by men, to feel the sting of rain and the chill of storm on my face. For there in the untamed and uncurated, I remember what is real. And the rains are coming, and I'm excited. For those of you that don't know, I live up in Eureka, California, where the coastal redwoods grow. Sandy came up to see me with her adult son. We had a great time. And yeah, any of you that find yourself up this way would be more than happy to give you a tour. But the salmon are waiting off the coast. We're expecting some of our first big rains this weekend, and they'll come home. There's a couple more shots. Here's the boat ride going to nowhere around the boutique island. And you see all the rooms, the balconies are facing out or facing into this atrium. I mean, it's quite lovely, and I was trying to have a good attitude about it, but just the contrast between the faux and the real was so profound in my mind. This is what reality looks like. Hanging out with humans, getting soaked in the rain, and but with great joy and feeling life.